Dubious role of Professor Manjit Singh, former Jethedar Akal Takht. Nowadays, Akali politicians who are far less concerned with religion and sacred historical traditions control the appointment of Jethedar Akal Takht through their party machinery, which has an absolute majority in the SGPC, controlled by the government under the Punjab Sikh Gurdwaras Act of 1925. SGPC has at times selected some undesirable persons who, though religious, were tempted to follow the wishes of the ruling government through secret maneuverings. The result was that such incumbents were either forced to resign or they themselves quit the post for greater material interest. Many such spiritually barren persons gave up all their pretensions of being religious personalities and joined the ruling Congress Party to become rich by the shortest route. Classical examples in this category are Jethedar Partap Singh from 1952 to 1955, Jethedar Mohan Singh Nagok 1935 to 1952, and Giani Bhupinder Singh, ex-high priest of Harmandir Sahib Golden Temple, and Ragi Darshan Singh of 1987 through 1988. During his tenure as SGPC president, Gurcharan Singh Tora had arbitrarily retired Giani Cheet Singh, high priest of Harmandir Sahib, because he did not like him personally. Jethedar Sadhu Singh Bahura, when he took the courage to condemn the anti-Sikh and Tantric practices of Yogi Bhajan. Professor Manjit Singh, former Jethedar of Sri Akal Takht, along with his hired scholars and journalists, suspended their correct thinking and action on vitally important issues. Dr. Harjinder Singh Dilgir has portrayed these misdeeds in his book Akal Takht Sahib, reference 17. And I shall confine my comments on issues not covered in the book of Dr. Dilgir and are related with this book. During the year 1995 through 1999, Professor Manjit Singh had visited the US, the UK, Canada, Israel, Korea, and other countries several times, so frequently that even the Foreign Minister of India has not visited these countries so frequently. It is upon Professor Manjit Singh to tell to the Sikh Panth that how he was seeking frequent visas for traveling abroad, who was financing his trips, and for what considerations, what was the purpose of these visits, persons contacted, and what Sikh cause has been fulfilled by these visits. I have devoted a whole chapter on this unholy alliance between Yogi Bhajan, Professor Manjit Singh, and the SGPC. On August 25, 1995, Professor Manjit Singh visited Korea to attend the mass Muni weddings in the Unification Church of controversial arms manufacturer and dealer Reverend Sun Myung Moon in Seoul. In this mass Muni wedding of 50,000 couples, including the Sikh couples, the presence of Jethedar Manjit Singh to bless the couples was an unpardonable act. As per accepted Sikh code of conduct, there is only one and duly approved form of Sikh wedding, known as Anand Karaj, at whose insistence and for what considerations Professor Manjit Singh visited Seoul to bless the couples, including Sikh couples, who were remarrying according to the Muni-style marriage ceremony and vows of marriage. When our saviors of the Panth are blessing the conversions of Sikh youth to Christianity and cult practices of self-styled gods, what will be the fate of the community? Only God knows. Reverend Sun Myung Moon's connections with Yogi Bhajan are not ruled out. In the month of March of 1993, the American woman belonging to Yogi Bhajan's Tantric cult were prohibited by the temple authorities to perform the seva of cleaning the sanctum sanctorum of Harmandir Sahib, Golden Temple, but they forced their way into the sanctum sanctorum of the Harmandir Sahib to perform the seva. Reference 18. In the month of May of 1995, Yogi Bhajan financed the trip of Professor Manjeet Singh and his hangers-on. It was during this trip that there were many secret understandings between Yogi Bhajan and former Jethadar of Akal Takht, which have been recorded in Chapter 7. It was during this trip of Professor Manjeet Singh that Mrs. Inderjeet Kaur was appointed as convener of World Sikh Convention, Western Hemisphere, and she emerged as Sri Sardarni Kaur Bhai Sahib BBG Inderjeet Kaur in the World Sikh Convention, organized under the patronage of Akal Takht Sahib. As was part of these secret deals, Professor Manjeet Singh helped the Tantric cult women followers of Yogi Bhajan, headed by Yogi Bhajan's wife, Mrs. Inderjeet Kaur, to enter the sanctum sanctorum of Harmandir Sahib, Golden Temple, on March 10, 1996, and perform the seva. Although there are a number of injunctions in the Adi Guru Granth and Rihatnamas to shun the company of the Tantric Saktas, the followers of Shakti and Maya, yet our Jethadar had dared to violate the code of conduct, the Rihat Maryada, prescribed by the Sikh gurus, by forcing the entry of Shakti cult followers of Yogi Bhajan in the sanctum sanctorum of Harmandir Sahib. Reference 19. After committing the sacrilegious act, the matter was referred to the Dharmic Salakar Committee, Religious Consultation Committee of the SGPC. The SGPC President Gurcharan Singh Tora joined hands with Professor Manjeet Singh a day later by explaining to the press that the decision to allow Amritdhari women to perform sevas shall be taken only after the meeting of the Dharmic Salakar Committee of the SGPC. Reference 20. I don't know which legal expert of Yogi Bhajan, Professor Manjeet Singh, or the SGPC advised them that post facto approval can be given. In this unpardonable episode, Professor Manjeet Singh, knowing full well the tantric practices of the anti-Sikh activities of Yogi Bhajan and his cult followers, forced their entry into the sanctum sanctorum of Harmandir Sahib, and a day later recommended to the SGPC that Amritdhari women should be allowed to perform the seva. It is upon Professor Manjeet Singh to explain to the Sikh Sangat that for what considerations he was regularly accepting the hospitality of Yogi Bhajan and his cult followers and endorsing their anti-Sikh activities, willfully, so much so, to violate the strict rules of the Rihat Maryada, the code of conduct of the Khalsa.